Welcome to Girl Fight Talk. I'm your host, Kayla Haley, and we're excited to be back with you guys again. We've got a lot going on today. Very excited to have a very special guest, Luke Thomas from MMAfighting.com, SB Nation, host of the Monday Morning Analyst and the Promotional Malpractice podcast. We're going to go ahead and give him a call today and see how we can discuss some of the things that have been going on this week. It's been a crazy week of events, and so we're going to go ahead and give him a call.
Can you hear us, Luke?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep, I can hear you, Luke.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining our show today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, so everybody, we've already introduced you, so we've got you a good shout out. You can follow Luke at SPN Luke Thomas on Twitter. And so, yeah, Luke, we want to kind of just go straight into it. It's been a pretty crazy week in the sport of mixed martial arts, and we have a little bit of time, so we want to just kind of jump right into it. Okay, Conor's Nevada Athletic Commission sentence was pretty ridiculous this week. We just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how the Nevada Athletics State Commission decided to go about his punishment and what you think about it.
Well, they decided to go about it arbitrarily and capriciously, much like they do almost virtually all of their other punishments. They notably didn't even follow what the Attorney General had recommended, which was, I believe, some measure of community service, but the fine was only $25,000. And they just decided that was just way too little, because they had done a proportional amount for the Jones versus Cormier brawl, and they decided to adopt that logic, which is, it's just moronic. I don't know what other words you can say for it when you're suggesting that a $300,000 fine for what would be, not a non-event, but a relatively not that serious event, which would only carry a $1,000 fine if the police had arrested him, it's deranged. It's deranged to do things like that. So
yeah.
They have the ability to yank licensing. That's what most government agencies do when someone reaches past a certain level of acceptability or don't meet certain thresholds for maintaining that license. But they don't ever want to do that because that's how they make money for the state. So they just instead do this phony show of force and these massive, massive fines.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I've heard a couple of different things, and I'm like, okay, I know they tried to do it based off of percentage, but he's getting paid, like $3 million for his show money. And I'm like, okay, I understand that they're trying to make a large enough of an impression on these guys to say, hey, we don't want you guys doing this. We don't want you making this kind of impression on the sport, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I mean, one of the commissioners was saying something about 10% of his purse, and here they are debating during the actual hearing what percentage of his purse they want to take away. And I'm like, okay, you guys don't. It's clear you don't even have a standard procedure for how to handle things like this.
No, they certainly don't. And they have. Remember, your justice is tantamount to your value to the state. So, for example, if you have someone like Floyd Mayweather who was essentially went to jail for, I don't know what everyone's definition of a heinous crime is, but probably even some level of domestic violence should be unpalatable to anyone. He goes to jail for that, not the longest sentence in the world, but nevertheless he did it. And they've never even suggested that his licensure be revoked because that would be endangering to them. What you see is essentially that the way that the state has, and this is not just a problem in Nevada, but Nevada handles it quite poorly. They think they have this responsibility to uphold the state's integrity, but the reality is the way it's constructed is another body should be handling these disciplinary hearings that isn't the one that's, uniquely concerned with monetary judgment. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it would entirely solve the problem either. But what I can certainly say is that as long as the same body that's charged with essentially bringing in revenue is also the same one that's regulating the guys bringing in the revenue,
right,
you're going to get a lot of ham-fisted results.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they talked about how they're even going to split up. I mean, they literally were having like a private meeting publicly. Oh, we're going to put 50% of the money towards this. We're going to put 50% of it towards, your campaign that you're going to do on your own dime, basically saying this is how we're going to have you spend your money for your punishment. So it's very bizarre. It was kind of uncomfortable. I was like, this is weird. This is really strange. And so now, like, it puts more context with other fighters who've had to deal with the Nevada Athletic Commission and just like how they feel like they have to grovel at their feet in order to just be able to fight. I'm glad that this whole idea of a suspension wasn't even a part of the conversation, because I'm just like, okay, like you said, Jones and Cormier actually assaulted one another. Like, they actually threw punches with their fists at one another in the main lobby. So at one of the hotels, so I'm like, okay, guys, let's just take a break. Let's just chill out. So Conor mentioned to Dana, he was like, I don't even know if I want to fight in Las Vegas anymore. So when you have these fighters who are, being punished by the NAC, and then they go ahead and say, I don't even want to fight here anymore, what kind of effect does that have on Las Vegas?
Well, they have to make good on the promise before it has any effect. So we'll actually see. Obviously, Conor's fighting at 205, but we'll see what happens going forward from there. But I mean, that's really the only recourse they have. You've seen what happens when everyone's like, well, can they appeal something that the commission does? I mean, if you want to pay for court, and even then, these state agencies and these other the judicial system in any state is going to be reluctant to take the side of someone who isn't even a citizen in that state necessarily regarding the actions of another state body that could very well be within the state commission's bylaws. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they're fair, but it could mean that they're within compliance. So really the only option you have is just to avoid them of the thing that they need and crave, which is any kind of good press or money. Mm-hmm. So if Conor McGregor is really serious and he can take his business elsewhere and then keep making a public note about it, in other words, not merely fight in New York or Ireland or whatever the case may be, and then clearly say, I'm doing this because I'm never going back there, that might have an effect. But short of that, boy, I really don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. And does he have to actually pay? So let's say he never wants to actually fight in Las Vegas again. Does he actually have to pay this fee?
Yeah, because they can just garnish his wages.
Okay.
They can put a tax on it, especially because he earned those in that state. The state does have a right to them. So, yeah, he has to. I mean, it's not like it's, he can pay the $150,000. Mm-hmm. That's not the point. But the point is that $150,000 for what?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. It's pretty ridiculous. So then, okay, so if he doesn't fight, and I think personally this is a great opportunity for him to push towards Dana and say, hey, because he's been wanting to fight in Ireland for, 2-3 years, and they keep, I don't know why, but I don't know if Conor actually, I think he wants to, but every time he has an opportunity to fight in Las Vegas, it kind of seems like he prefers to do so. And this might be an opportunity for him to go and fight for his fans, the ones who've come and supported him time after time, flying and hotels and tickets in Las Vegas. So this might be an opportunity for him to go out to Ireland and put on a show for his fans.
Yeah, I mean, they just went to, obviously we know at 204 they went to Manchester, England. Now, I don't think that did very well on pay-per-view, but Bisping versus Henderson is not Conor McGregor. We had a debate yesterday on the MMA Beat about who's the bigger celebrity, Ronda or Conor. Mm-hmm. And I think you can come down on either side of that argument, which is they're obviously both massive stars. But if the lesson is anything, it's that if Ronda can sell 1 million in Australia and 1 million in Brazil, stands to reason you might be able to change some things and have Conor sell over 1 million in Ireland, right, by putting it on pay-per-view. So I think that's more of a question of when, not if, but it's just so hard to say exactly when that will be.
Yeah. And I think, has Ireland do they have a more positive outlook on MMA now? I know for a while they had it just wasn't looked at in a great light, it seems like, for a while. It seemed like there were a lot of red tape even just to do their show at Croke Park. So I'm kind of curious, are they even supporting, I know the fans want Conor, but does the government, does the actual country support Conor in fighting in Ireland?
I think there's probably enough support to do it, but if you're asking about the general climate, obviously since the death of João Carvalho, there has obviously been a bit of a pushback in terms of what kind of those events should take place, to what extent they should be regulated, to what extent should the state be involved. It's not involved there at the current juncture. So there is definitely a fair amount of negative sentiment still floating around. Whether that would apply to Conor McGregor, I have my doubts, but MMA generally is still very much facing an uphill climb there.
Yeah. So we've had UFC 196, we've had UFC 200, 202, we're going to have 205, and then we're going to have 207 at the end of the year. This has been probably one of the most epic years of MMA I've ever seen. And so what do you think is going to be, which card do you think is going to come out on top at the end of the 2016?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't think it'll be Rousey, although I could be wrong about it. I don't think it'll be 206, even if they get St. Pierre. I'm going to say either 205 or 202.
Okay.
I think those are your two clubhouse leaders right there. Obviously, both would be a Conor show. Both would be Conor in a headlining show, obviously. 205 has a major cast to go along with it. And 202 did as well, So we'll see what kind of card they put together for 207 or if something happens to 205 along the way. But as I speak to you today, 205 seems like the safe bet, or maybe 202.
Right. I mean, you've got Donald Cerrone. This card is so stacked. 3 title fights, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and everyone is on the card. So each of these the top 3 fights on the card could easily be their own main events. I agree with you. I think that it's probably going to be the biggest card. Although Ronda coming back was pretty exciting news on Wednesday. Dana came out and said, "Hey, Ronda's back." What were your initial impressions with that announcement?
I had a hunch and some info that was probably going to happen. I wasn't sure if it was going to be that one or maybe the first quarter of 2017, but I knew it was imminent at some point anyway. Yeah, I'm excited. I think I have all the same questions that everyone else does. To what extent is she mentally ready for this? To what extent is she physically ready for this? What's it mean that she's still with Edmund Tarverdian? What does it mean that she's not, that she is still very much on some kind of media hiatus? What does it mean for how she's going to handle fight promotion? What does it mean for who's the biggest star in the sport now? All those things. Even if she wins, will this be her last win or lose? If she wins, is there going to be a cyborg fight? It just raised, the prospect of so many other questions, and for which there are no answers, but certainly they're fun to, think about.
Yeah. No, my biggest thing is, okay, I think that we have we have 2 clear case studies. We've seen Ronda being a huge star. We saw her epic defeat with Holly Holm. And then we saw Conor on his epic meteoric rise, and then his defeat by Nate Diaz. And it's perfect because we've been able to kind of see and contrast both of their stories as they both suffered defeats and have their responses to it. And, I'm not here to judge or criticize Ronda on how she handled her defeat to Holly Holm, but it is clear to see that, okay, after you took off over a year to do what exactly? I think that's kind of my biggest question. Is it because, you talked about on Ellen how there was a lot of emotional, psychological damage that you suffered because of the loss. Is it deeper than that? Is it literally just the fight that you lost? Is it because of some other stuff going on, some more personal stuff? And I'm really curious. I'm like, okay, and it wasn't like she was in the media really at all for the past year. She did her little media tour after the fight, but even since then, it's not like she's been doing movies, at least not to my knowledge. What has she been doing for the last year is really my question. And so were you considering if you wanted to come back? And those are all things psychologically that I'm like, okay, if those are the things you're considering, where are you at leading up to this fight? Because if you're walking into the octagon with that mindset, Amanda Nunes will hurt you. And I don't want to see that if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems a little speculative to me. I mean, I think part of her taking the time off was entirely appropriate. Right? She had complained of media burden, and so had Conor McGregor and virtually every other headliner like George St. Pierre. You see that at the very, very top, there is extraordinary burnout. And St. Pierre obviously had done a lot more before he took time off and didn't do it after a devastating loss. I don't mean to equate all of them, but other than to say, Ronda Rousey had an extraordinary run prior to that loss, and it was incredibly burdensome to her, in part by her own design and accepting commercials and accepting roles in Hollywood and books and publicity tours and the like. Okay, she brought some of that on herself. That's a fair criticism, but at some point she is a human being, and there's a limit to which you can tolerate this sort of thing. You add to that a devastating knockout loss in front of the world, one of the most iconic images ever of her getting head kicked. Yeah, I can see why she would want to take a little bit of a break. My only issue is not that she wants to take a break, or even that it was really a year. I don't really mind that so much. For me, a lot of her sympathizers and apologists want to say that she lost because of the reasons I just mentioned, that she was overly burdened. And I don't think that's wrong, that plays a part. But I don't see how you can watch tape on that fight with Holm and say that there is not a skill differential there. Now, styles make fights. I am not saying she can't go back there and start beating people up. We obviously saw what she was doing prior to the Holm fight. I'm just saying it's clear that there were many portions of her game where she was at a major, major, major technical deficit.
Yep.
And the idea for me that if you didn't spend that time off in the year getting better at it, you lost all that time. It's not even that you stay neutral necessarily because everyone else is training. So for me, that's the only concern is to what extent has she been training in that time off to shore up one of those problems. And I think if you felt like she was getting better at that, I would have less concerns about all the other issues you raised psychologically.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, just like George St. Pierre, it was very obvious even before, as he's considering and wants to make his comeback, he's been training. I mean, he even talked about, I'm going to go through a practice. I'm going to go through a practice training camp. I'm going to go through the whole process just to make sure. He did that to test himself. He was his own litmus test to make sure, hey, if I'm going to come back, I'm going to make sure I'm coming back in true form. So I agree with you with that. And then thanks so much for your time, Luke. One more question. Okay, do you actually believe that Ronda actually deserves, and I know this word deserves, it's kind of this, what does that even mean in the state of UFC right now, but do you think that it was the right match make for Ronda to come back to fight for the title?
I mean, yeah, basically I do, but I wouldn't argue it too strenuously. Obviously, the financial concerns for the promotion are there. There's a question about to what extent do they have to give her a title shot to get her to come back at all. There's another question of what is really palatable for the audience out there, given all the other matches that could be made, provided she'll stick around. And there's not, and also, it's just hard. But, here's the one thing I would just ask for people who are in favor of the fight. If you believe that matching her up after a vicious, devastating KO loss like that, gets her right back to a title shot, even not even against the woman who beat her, okay. Number one, just admit it's largely about, it's not exclusively about money, right? Just say that up front.
Right.
And I think the other thing they have to say is, the problem with, look, Jose Aldo has an incredibly strong argument for getting a title shot.
Right.
Undefeated for 10 years, loses once. Now, he lost badly, but they told him to fight Frankie Edgar, and he beat Edgar better the second time than he did the first time. Yeah, that guy deserves a title shot. I don't know how anyone could say otherwise. Habib Nurmagomedov, maybe a little bit less so because of the injury time off. Juliana Pena, I would put even underneath that. She has obviously done a tremendous amount in her time, but it's not like she was some, Jose Aldo level contender. It wasn't like she had just washed the rest of the division. But the truth is, when someone like Juliana Pena says, I'm winning, and she just got smashed, how is it possible you can give her a title shot? I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but I definitely don't think she's crazy. There's a lot of people who just want to say, oh, that's ridiculous. Who do you think you are? Oh, you mean the one who's getting her hand raised? I don't know why the person getting her hand raised is all of a sudden the insane one. That to me seems really unfair. So we don't have to necessarily agree with her logic that, well, she'll walk, she doesn't get what she wants. That's a different scenario, and I think it's okay. But whenever the contendership queue is jumped, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers.
Yep.
Just because there are winners does not mean we have to pretend that there's no one who lost in this process.
Mm-hmm.
We need to acknowledge it because that contendership process is actually the very architecture of the sport and generally what makes these divisions work. So I think it's the right call, but I definitely understand why some people might be upset about it, and I don't think they're crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's clear that that's the motto that the UFC has chosen. Time and time again this year, they've chosen money over merit. And I don't think anyone could argue that this year. I mean, Stephen Thompson, congratulations to you, man. You, by merit, you got the number one contendership and are fighting Tyron Woodley. But other than that, I mean, I don't know of anyone else who's really. The UFC, it's been very clear that they value how much you can make the company money over the merit of your skill in the sport. So, But with that, we just want to thank you again, Luke, for coming onto the show. Thanks so much for your time and rescheduling with us and being patient with us. We want to shout out Luke again at SBN Luke Thomas. He has tons of shows. Go and check him out on YouTube and all the other social medias out there. Luke, do you have anything you want to put out on the show?
No, let's just follow me on Twitter at SBN Luke Thomas. Other than that, I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Awesome. That was Luke Thomas of SBN Nation. And I feel privileged to have that show with him, for him to come on and talk sport, talk MMA with us. Yeah, if you guys haven't heard, you've got to go and check up all of the recent events. I mean, it's been ridiculous. So we've got the two things we kind of just talked about were Conor McGregor, and we talked about this earlier too, is he and Nate were throwing water bottles, and then Conor actually picked up a can and chucked it across a sea of people, of observers, media personnel, fans, and tried to hit Nate with it. They just had their Nevada State Athletic Commission hearing on Monday morning. We talked about that earlier, and he got sentenced $150,000 in fees or a fine, I should say, and 50 hours of community service, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, to have someone throw stuff, compared that to Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, that's too harsh of a penalty. It's way too harsh. And then the other thing was UFC 207. Ronda Rousey's coming back. Twitter was going crazy when Dana announced that. And immediately the conversation shifted from, oh my gosh, Ronda's back, to, oh my gosh, Ronda's back and Juliana Peña's not getting her title shot. Chris Cyborg's not getting the fight she thought. She's been killing herself to get to 140 for these last couple of fights in the UFC just to prepare to have a fight with Ronda. So, at the end of the day, I'm excited that Ronda's back. I think she brings an excitement, a presence to the women division, the 135 division, honestly, all the divisions. But I have to ask, okay, Ronda, she did lose. She lost devastatingly. Not only did she lose to Holly, but then Holly went ahead and lost twice since she beat Ronda. That just doesn't present a very positive light on Ronda as she comes back. And yes, we know styles make fight. That doesn't mean that Ronda wouldn't have beat those two girls. And Ronda did beat Misha, even though Misha beat Holly. So it's kind of like this merry-go-round of the belt right now. And I think what people are excited about is that we have someone who can possibly come back and be a dominant champion. I think that's what people are excited about. That's what people love about Conor McGregor. That's what people love about John Jones. That's what people loved about Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre and all of the other big fighters that will eventually and have been put into the Hall of Fame. So it's exciting, like I said, that she's back. But I think there are some variables to consider. And I think let's kind of just talk about the style of that fight. I think, Ronda does well when fighters come and charge at her. You think about Kat Zingano. She beat her in I can't remember, all her fights ended in under 30 seconds, but she armbarred Kat Zingano in 13 seconds. She knocked out Beche Cahea in, I think it was the first round. She went ahead and armbarred pretty much most of her competition in the first round. And these are all fighters that have styles that are aggressive with Ronda's aggressiveness. And so that's the perfect kind of style, because once you're both clashing with each other, that's perfect for Ronda, because she'll clinch you and she'll toss you and she'll armbar you. That's pretty much what she does. Holly, on the other hand, was completely different. Holly is a long-ranged, patient fighter. Holly has the mindset, not of an MMA fighter, she has the mindset of a boxer. Holly knows that she could be going 10 rounds of boxing in her mind. Ronda's used to, and in all of her interviews, she even talks about, if I wait too long, I'm not doing a good job. So that's the way her athletic mind has been trained into believing, the faster I get this fight over with, the better of an athlete I am. So you put those two mindsets together in an octagon, and you come out with what you got with Holly. Holly used her footwork. There were times when Ronda, she literally looked like a matador. Ronda was the bull, and Holly, swung the red cape around, and to Ronda's surprise, she was tripping all over herself on the floor because Holly wasn't there anymore. And then she was patient. Holly was patient to where she could counter Ronda. And I don't know where Ronda kind of got this idea that she could strike. Sure, she knocked out, I think it was Sarah McMahon and Beche Cahea, but none of those girls can strike either. It's not, you're comparing, that's apples to apples. When you're talking about Holly Holm, when you're talking about Shevchenko, you're talking about a whole nother class of striker that Ronda does not know about. And maybe Ronda has trained with some of those girls. They talked about how, especially with Edmund being the boxing coach that he is, or supposed to be at least, brings in these boxers for Ronda to come and fight. It's always hard to trust. Okay, have you ever heard of a coach? Let's just put it this way. Have you ever heard of a coach that brings in a sparring partner for their fighter and says, "Oh man, my fighter just did not do well"? I've never heard of that. I've always heard, a coach being like, "Hey, oh my gosh, we brought in so-and-so and they did so great against so-and-so." And it's surprising that I think that Edmund, because of Ronda's success, and everybody wants to credit Ronda or credit Edmund with Ronda's success, most of her fights have come from submission. Edmund doesn't know submissions. Edmund's a boxing coach. So if most of Ronda's fights, let me just look this up. Let me see how many of her fights. Yeah, okay. So all of Ronda's wins were wins except for Holly Holm. And so she, let's see, does it say how she won? Okay, so first fight, submission armbar. Second fight, submission armbar. Third fight, submission armbar. Fourth fight, armbar. Fifth fight, armbar. Sixth fight, armbar. Seventh fight, armbar. Eighth fight, armbar. Ninth fight against Sarah McMahon, TKO, knee to the body. 10th fight, TKO punches, Alexis Davis. 11th fight, Kat Zingano, armbar. And then 12th fight, KO punch. And I think that was the body, when she hit her to the body. And so, okay, so Ronda has had, 3 fights where she's beaten the girl by strikes. But compare that to her, out of her wins, to all of her other 12 fights, 9 of her fights have come from submission. So I just don't understand how, like, and yes, we have seen her progress in her striking. She has done all these things, but it's not like the foundation of Ronda's career has been through her submissions. And so for Edmond to get all this credit about, oh, I built this fighter. No, you didn't. Even the first time, she even talks about it, how the first time she came into your gym, you didn't pay her any mind. That frustrates me. Okay, if you're a guy coach, this really frustrates me. If you're a guy coach, let me calm down. Have some respect for the women fighters, right? I don't even know if Edmond knew Ronda's pedigree in judo and being an Olympian, but even if he didn't, have some respect. You never know where someone's background is, and just treat everyone like, like an equal. Treat them like you have respect for them. I think Ronda's mom even talked about this, how he didn't even treat her with any respect when she first came into his gym. So, excuse me. Ronda, I think you can find a better coach. You have the money, even if you wanted to train with a bigger super camp and you didn't want to train with like everyone else, you know what? You have the money to pay that coach separately to get the training that you need. Because you even look at, and I hate to say this, but you even look at what's happened to the careers of Travis Brown and the other fighters who've moved to Glendale Fight Club. Their careers haven't done well since they've moved over there. So the common denominator, let's put it this way, the common denominator is Edmond. I know you're loyal, Ronda, but don't let your loyalty ruin your career. Don't let your loyalty ruin your career. I think that because of how aggressive Amanda Nunes is, I think that this is actually a good matchup for Ronda. Ronda uses people's aggression against them, and that's exactly what the sport of judo does anyways. So I think as long as Amanda continues to be the aggressive, puncher, striker that she is, I think that if Ronda just simply sticks to her roots of judo, ties her up, trips her, throws her, and armbars her, should be done in the first round. I mean, that's, to me, this kind of seems like an easy fight to guess how it's going to go, to predict, I should say. Like I said, I think because of how aggressive Amanda Nunes is, this is a fight for Ronda. Just like her other ones, Kat Zingano, Bethe Correia, Sarah McMahon, Miesha Tate, Liz Carmouche, they're all very aggressive fighters. They come at her, she tangles them, she trips them, she throws them, she armbars them. No one can escape that armbar. So, and Amanda Nunes says that she also grew up doing judo, but Ronda's an Olympian. So that's like Miesha Tate telling Sarah McMahon, hey, I did wrestling in high school. And nobody's saying Miesha Tate's not good at wrestling. She's really good. But there's just a completely different caliber and level of technique and stuff going on. Yeah, I'm excited to see how this story progresses over the next month. We've got, between Ronda, between Conor, between hopefully, and Luke talked about this, George St. Pierre, there are a lot of variables coming up on the end of the year. I asked him, what do you think is going to be the biggest card of the year? He said UFC 205 in Madison Square Garden, and I agree. I think that Ronda's comeback's going to be huge, and maybe because of how big, like, the UFC's continued to grow throughout this year with Conor McGregor, that might help translate into Ronda's return. It might translate into her pay-per-view buys. And I think that it'll translate into the excitement around the fight. Especially since, Alvarez McGregor. Especially since, it's like in the mainstream news a lot more these days with ESPN. It's always been on Fox, but The Washington Post, I think, consistently posts things. TMZ Sports, I don't really know if you consider that news. But there's just been a lot more outlets talking about the sport. So the lineup we've got for UFC 205, we've got Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez for the challenging for the lightweight title. We've got Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson facing off against each other for the welterweight 170-pound title. We've got Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. See, never can do it right. Kowalkiewicz. I don't know. Okay, anyways. Both are Polish fighters, and they're going to be fighting against each other on the main card of UFC 205. And then we've got Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero. Contender fight for the middleweight 185-pound division. And then we've got Kelvin Gastelum versus Donald Cerrone fighting at 170. And then we've got Miesha Tate versus hometown girl Raquel Pennington. So this is just the main card. This is just the main card. And then you've got the prelims, right? The prelims, Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy Stevens. Huge fight. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Michael Johnson. Huge fight. Rashad Evans versus Tim Kennedy. Like, huge fight. Who else do we have? Rafael Natal versus Tim Bosch. We've got Jim Miller versus Thiago Alves. And the card just goes on and on. We've got Liz Carmouche on the card. So, these are fights that to happen all on one card. I can't imagine a card bigger than this. So I'm excited to see this happen. I think that it's going to break gates. I think it's going to break pay-per-view buys. I'm just excited for this one. And then I'm excited to have UFC 207 in New York. I think the goal is for us to be able to go out there and cover that one live for you guys. And, see what's going on. Meet some more fighters. Get some more interviews on this show. We're, like I said before, we're constantly reaching out and trying to get new people. Would you, Josh, we've been talking about going to UFC 207. That'd be a fun one, right?
Yeah, it'd be super sick.
It would be so crazy.
Down.
It's hard to go out and, get the whole logistics thing to go out and try to shoot cover a fight. But I'm excited for us to give it a try and add some more experience to our tool belt.
Yeah, for sure. It would be great. It would be great if that were able to happen. So.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, you guys. Okay, I talked about my Broncos last time, but so they fought on Sunday. Or it's not fought. They played on Sunday against the Atlantic Falcons. Lost. They played last night against San Diego Chargers. Lost. This is becoming really sad. Our offensive line just is not up to snuff right now. I need us to tighten things up. I've never heard in the news of sports news, especially with oh man, that offensive line is amazing. Usually when you're talking about the offensive line, it's because they're not doing their job, and you don't want to be talked about if you're on the O-line. You kind of just want to be, oh good, they're just doing their job. They've been getting so much more news than necessary because they've been messing up a lot. So many, literally, I don't even know how many. They got a safety last night, San Diego against Denver. It's just, I hope we can, and Simeon was back last night, so I don't know if he's still banged up. He got hit quite a few times last night as well, which I don't like seeing. It's been cool. I have a friend who's going to be coming on the show soon. Hear from some women like we've been talking about. One of my good friends is competed to compete for these last Rio Olympics, didn't make it, but that's okay. We're gonna hear her story, gonna hear how she's handled it since competing for the national team, and kind of just hear a lot more of the background of what it takes to compete to even become an Olympian. So I think that's it for now. We'll talk to you guys later. It's been fun. Like, subscribe. Go ahead and get onto YouTube, onto iTunes, all those different things at Girl Fight Talk. www.girlfighttalk.com, and show some love. Peace.